1, 2, 3.
1.
1, 2, 3.
I wanna be a drill instructor.
I wanna save all of my...
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ben Cole and the talent, Mr. Schneider. Get music. Get to work. So Ben's product specialist at ProMark, well, Diodario / ProMark Evans, and the other string side of things.
So anyway, tuning. Al's going to cover most of the part about tuning because he does it every day, and that's why we call him the drum doctor. That's why people bring stuff to him regularly. That's why Al does what he does. Just don't listen to him when he talks. When he performs, he does a great job. So the main thing about drumming is getting them to sound like drums. One of the biggest challenges we have when you buy a new drum set, when you put a new drum up, and you play it, and you expect it to sound a certain way, and it doesn't, is how to get it to sound the way you want it to sound. Al's going to talk a lot about tuning the resonant side of the drum, which is the most neglected side. I do a lot of snare drum tuning clinics where I'll actually provide a free snare drum head, bring them in your snare drum. I'll show you how I like to tune it. I'll tune it together, and I'll look at the bottom head, and I'll say, wow, how long has this been on here? And they'll go, I bought the drum in 1984, so what is that? Yeah, 20 years. Yeah, it's amazing how neglected the resonant side of the drum is, and how important it is to tune it. Drum heads, like many other things, because one thing, this side is being hit. What's happening to the bottom side? It's vibrating, it's stretching, and the more it does that, it goes dead. And drummers don't know it. Unless, like Peter that goes into every club and spends 2 hours tuning his drums. Because we're sitting back here doing this, we don't hear what they really sound like. We think we sound awesome. We're just the best. And these drums sound great. And the bass player's going, your drums sound terrible. Do something about that, like bass players can hear. But, the audience is hearing your true drum sound. They're hearing what the drums sound like out there. You hear what it sounds like over here and you think you're awesome. Biggest challenge is that resonant head, because it's probably gone dead. I recommend changing drum heads every week. No, I'm just kidding. For an average playing time, you're practicing in a half-hour day, an hour day, whatever. Not playing too hard, not playing a lot, changing the batter head 3 times a year. Every 3rd time you change the batter head, you change the resonant head. It just has to be done. And the only way to know it is just to remind yourself, let's see, this is the 3rd time I've changed these, I need to change the resonant heads. Because I think I sound great, but I sound terrible. Because they're dead. It happens. And if you want your drums to sound good, which you all do, you've got to be thinking about that. So one of the things I want to cover first real quickly, because we have like an hour, and I want to give Al fair time here, because what he has to say is the real reason you're here. Evans, over the last 4 years, has been working on this system called Level 360. And it's on all the boxes, and it's a nice logo, and it looks pretty, and all that. What the heck does it mean? Right now, it's just a number. Level 360. 360 must mean it's a circle, right? Well, most drum heads are. So that's not real revolutionary. The thing about Level 360 that's most important comes down to the tuning side of things. This process I'm going to describe makes tuning much easier. Bearing edge on a drum. Hey Alex, can you show me a bearing edge? The bearing edge, this piece right here, your drum head has to sit on that bearing edge. And traditionally, us drumhead manufacturers, being as smart as we are, we build the collar of the drumhead, this piece right here. We built it kind of at a shape like this. So the bearing edge would sit right here, and then we have to seat the drum. So to seat the drum, you put pressure on it. So now the bearing edge is on the flat part. So now it's sitting here. So, taking it from this, stretching it to this, you hear all the pops and snapples and cracks when you're seating the drum head. Put it on there, give it some CPR. Stretch it all out. Okay, now it's seating, I can feel it. Oh yeah, now it must be good. Well, at Evans, you know, being we were geniuses, we thought, why not just make it that way? So now the drum head has a collar shape that's at a more abrupt angle. So when you put it on the bearing edge, obviously in this one it's great, but here we go. Put it on the bearing edge, it's already seated. It doesn't have to be stretched to the bearing edge. And what does that do for us? Well, you're going to show the contrast. See how that tips back and forth on the bearing edge? It's because of sitting here.
Never tune a drum that way.
This one is already there. It's already on the drum. I've done these clinics where I'll have a guitar player come up who promises they've never tuned a drum before and has no idea how to do it. So they'll come up and they do.
Oh yeah, he does that too.
Put out, tighten the tension rods all the way around. You know, us smart drummers know it's supposed to be a star pattern, but you know they do it this way. Except for Al. And you know, with the level 360, it sounds great. Couple real benefits there. If you break a head during a gig, you've got to change it quick. You're going to get a decent sounding drum without having to mess with it a lot. You might want to fine tune it later if you're, you know, because a lot of us are picky. But in the gig, you're going to have a drum sound without having to play with it a lot. Another advantage, if you don't have a lot of experience tuning, if you're a fairly new drummer, you still want your drums to sound like your favorite drummer. It's much easier to get a drum sound without having to seat it, without having to do all this stuff to it, and still have a good pure sound. With the guitar players that did that, I would walk up to the drum, totally remove a tension rod. It still sounded good. Took out a second one, still sounded like a drum. Took out a third, and well, not so much anymore. But you know, totally detuning a couple of the tension rods, it still sounded good because the bearing edge is sitting on the flat part of the drum before it's even stretched or installed. So you get a nice drum sound out of it just without even putting it on the drum. So that was our genius. The tough part about that was all the new molds. We basically had to recreate a drumhead factory, which wasn't inexpensive, but it's a much better product now. It really has changed. It's the biggest significant change in drumhead world since Mylar. So it worked. Another advantage of that on like old vintage drums, the one thing that we all fool ourselves to think is that drums are round. They look round in many cases, but if you have a vintage drum that's a little bit out of round, it'll still work. So it fits on most drums much better. This particular drum head is one of our newer models. This is our Evans heavyweight. It's two 10 mil plies. The mill is pretty heavy. It's pretty heavy drum head with a 3 mil dot. The mill being the thickness. With 2 ply heads. A little bit of a secret from Evans. Drum heads, we call it Mylar, you can call it plastic. It's plastic. It comes off a big roll. And when it's extruded onto that roll, it's stretched and it's widened to make a roll of Mylar. So it comes off this big roll onto a big table, and then circles are cut. With the 2 ply heads, one thing that's very important, we're the only drumhead company that does this, is putting the plies the same direction, because Mylar has a grain just like wood. So if you don't do that, then they can end up like this and then running out of phase. The other thing that's important is when you lay them together like this, making sure, because it's coming off a roll, that it's not like this and not like this. So when the circle is cut, literally a Sharpie marker, and there's, you know, $7 million machine, there's a Sharpie marker on it that drops down and draws an L. So that when the 2 plies are put together, they're running the same direction. That's one step. The other step is, to make this 360 collar, it has to be heated. So it's got to be heated and bent. The one thing that we do is we only heat the edge. We don't heat the center, because that destroys the plastic. Or you can get it with a dead drum head before you even buy it. So we only heat the sides. And then inside here, if I could show you, there is in the hoop, there's a little J channel. What the J channel does is it holds the glue in place. There's all these little holes drilled in. The J channel holds the glue in place. We actually started doing that about 6 years ago for the marching percussion world. Because the marching percussion was using a lot more tension. Now we do it, well, why don't we do it with everything? So now we do it with everything. 3,000 pounds of pressure before it pulls out. You're not going to play that hard. So you're not going to tune it that high. So the last thing about it with the Level 360, because you don't have to stretch it and because you don't have to do all these things to it, the tuning range, which I was actually going to show you here in a minute, but the tuning range is much wider. Because you don't have to stretch it onto the bearing edge, you can tune it much deeper. You can just put a little bit of attention and you've got drum sound. So one of the things we're going to do, I'm going to jump back in when Al's finishing up, talk a little bit about drum sticks because we also own ProMark. Somebody in this room is going to walk out with a set of resonant heads for their drums. And we've got a few other goodies to give away, but I'm going to let Al start talking a little bit about what I started to talk about. He can put it into practice for you.
So, a quick question.
Yes.
Does it matter what angle the bearing edge is on your drums for these, or?
It does not, but the bearing edge matters, but it won't matter because of this. This helps that. But bearing edges are different drumhead company. Some are very sharp, some are closer to the edge, some are closer to the middle, some are closer to the center.
This is just for.
This will work for everything.
What makes the most difference is how flat something sits on the drum. I don't see the sharpness or anything which I'll demonstrate has much to do with it, as long as the head is sitting flat. So what I'm going to do is just cover the basics real quick and then get into how important the bottom head is. You want to try and use the same type key each time, so it feels the same in your hand. So getting started here, when you're putting a head on the drum, one thing you want is lubrication. You don't want to use oil or Vaseline or anything like that because it ends up gumming things up. What I like to use is paraffin wax. You can get it at hardware stores, canning stores, that kind of stuff. So you just get a little paraffin on there.
Are you putting it on the threads?
On the threads. You can come up afterwards and see this thing is getting worn down all over the place. I've been using it for a while.
Do you ever put wax on the bearing edge?
No. Usually make sure the bearing edge is clean with it. I put wax. And then when I hand tighten the screws in, and once you got these as tight as you can get them with your fingers, you want to go back around, put your hand on top, push down, and tighten it up again.
So lug lube's not on your list out?
Not on my list.
Thanks a lot.
And what that should have done is got everything on there very even. I go around, take a half turn. You can see how even it is all the way around. Same thing, another half turn until I get it to where I want the drum. And anybody who's been around me much has heard me say the way I learned was top head for tension, bottom head for tone. And what that means is you get the top head to where it feels good when you're hitting it. And then we get into how important the bottom head actually is. Now I'm not going to change anything on the top head. You want a jazz tuning, we come way up on the bottom head.
that a DW Lazy Susan?
That's just the bottom head. More of a rock tuning. Don't go that much. That's just playing with the bottom head. So you can get just about any sound you want, just from the bottom head alone. And what Ben was saying earlier, I always get the question, how often should I change my bottom heads? What a lot of people don't understand is every time you're hitting that top head, the bottom head's ballooning. You might not be able to see it. If we had a slow motion camera, you could see it. Especially people that are heavy hitters. Every time you hit it, that bottom head is going like that. So it stretches, which means it won't stay in tune. So I usually recommend, depending on how much somebody plays, I happen to look back because I keep records of some of the guys that whose drums I take care of. And some guys like Don, he plays so much that I change the bottom heads every second time that I change the tops. Other guys, it's like Ben said, about every third time. And I still see people all the time that have the set that they bought in 1960 and still have the original bottom heads on them. And they're just dead as a doornail. So it's really important to pay attention to that.